Hi, everyone, and welcome to what is the second webinar in our series of 3 during Mental Health Awareness Week. This webinar in particular is going to be focused on supporting our veterans, and we've got an amazing panel of guests to talk through. Some of the things that we'll be covering off is kind of discussing the impact on mental health faced by military personnel during their transition to civilian employment and how employers can best support and engage with veterans in the workplace. We'll look at kind of dispelling the myth that service leavers are broken and highlight the extraordinary kind of qualities that they can bring to a working environment. I will be discussing with them kind of around their own personal experiences when it comes to mental health, but also how they've also helped veterans kind of open up and start talking about their own mental health. And then we'll review what it means to explore your individual purpose and the value of finding meaningful employment. So like I said, we've got a brilliant panel of guests. So without further ado, let's get them introduced. Dr. Lizzy Billy, tell us about kind of yourself and a brief intro.
Hi, thank you so much. Great to be here. So I'm Dr. Lizzy Bernthal. I left the Army 3 years ago after 25 years in the Army as a nurse and a midwife, and I've got a PhD in resilience and wellbeing, which is hence the doctor bit. So I'm passionate to help military person in transition. There's an amazing world out there. We have so much to offer, and it's just to have, own who we are, own our story, and then we can fly once we find our purpose.
Amazing. And Matt.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Matt Dickinson. So I left the Army 11 years ago now. Started at 16, joined the Army Foundation College and stayed in for 8 years. And I've worked my way from the bottom to the top. And I'm really keen on how we support the journey from the transition from leaving the forces into new employment in a new world. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Joe?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Again, as I said, it's great to be here. Any opportunity to talk about this kind of stuff I think is really helpful. So I'm a former Army officer myself, served 8 years. I left 4 years ago, and I kind of stepped out of the military into what might be seen as a bit of a stereotypical job for an ex-Army officer. Really wasn't for me. There wasn't really that much alignment. And through serendipity and several of the factors, I've ended up in the third sector working for Samaritans now. So my focus really at the minute is that integration between well-being and emotional health, that transition out of the military, as Paul said, and then that meaningful employment and your life thereafter and your day-to-day dealings with everyone around you. So that's me.
Awesome, thank you. Andy.
Yeah, my name's Andy Bishop. I'm an ex-Royal Engineer. I served 22 years in the Corps of Royal Engineers, leaving in 2012. And I struggled with my mental health throughout the transition period. Since leaving the military, I've become a health and safety consultant and trainer. And now I kind of focus on mental health, the mental health aspect of health and safety, and concentrate on the ManGang organisation that I founded a couple of years ago to help any men that might be struggling.
Amazing. And last but not least, Billy.
My name is Billy MacLeod. I'm the founder and chief operations officer of a charity called Veterans in Action that helps veterans who are struggling with their mental health. We focus on a study called post-traumatic growth, enabling veterans to grow within a long-term project that allows them to move forward and hopefully to gain purposeful employment with any of these lovely people that are on this webinar today.
Amazing. So let's get straight into it then. I alluded to it in the intro. One very important point is to break this assumption that veterans are somehow broken when they leave the services. How can you encourage service leavers to explore their individual purpose? And I'll direct that at Dr. Lizzy.
Hi. So number one, I think the myth is that, or as you say, veterans are broken. Number one, a veteran, you can be just serving for 1 day. It doesn't have to be the cenotaph. You don't have to be 95 to be a veteran. We're all veterans if we've just been in the Army, or the military. So yes, so the passion I have is to help people find their purpose. We all have a reason why we're put on this planet, but sometimes we're not aware of it. And I think the biggest advice I would support those who are going through that transition is to learn about who you are, what legacy you want to create, and so you know what you want to do with your life. And I think the most important thing is when we're in the services, we are part of an extraordinary organisation, but sometimes we lose our own identity because we are part of this bigger machine. And once you leave, you can be your own person. But sometimes we don't know who that own person is. And as a result of that, we can go through a bit of uncertainty as to who we are, what we can offer, and so forth. So identifying, and I deliver workshops on this, identifying the reason we were put on this planet, who we are, can make a massive, massive difference. And once we find our purpose and we find the reason we're here, it's just extraordinary how all our mental health issues that we might have had just disappear because we suddenly own who we are, our authentic self, and then we can soar.
I think following on from that then, so I'd like to open that up from what Dr. Lizzy just mentioned and ask anyone on the panel to say, well, how did you identify kind of with yourself? How did you look at yourself having left the military to try and figure out kind of that identity of your own, having left, an organization, the military that you've been such a big part of? How did you find your own identity? I'll open that up to anyone that wants to kind of have a chat about it.
I'll go first. So myself, leaving the military was, I would say, pretty traumatic. I wanted to leave, but the day of walking out the camp gate for the last time was pretty traumatic. One day you had 200 friends. The next day you didn't have anybody that you knew, really. I found that transition pretty hard. Trying to find an identity within the civilian world, you still come out with a military mindset, and it's changing that mindset that we have to do to adapt to this new kind of part of our life, which is entering into the civilian world of employment. It can be traumatic because there was a lack of understanding at that time when I left. I think now there's a better understanding of mental health and how it affects us. And making that transition is the biggest mental health problem we have, I believe, leaving a cocoon of safety, which basically the military offers you.
Yeah, well, perfect. And go on, Matt, sorry.
I think that's Joe.
Yeah,
Joe, sorry.
I think just to add to that, I think what's been said has been great. What I would say is that it's a continuum of learning. I wouldn't say kind of leaving and expecting to have all the answers straight away. I think is an unrealistic aspiration once you leave, and it definitely is a journey of self discovery, and you have to have that introspective look and really give yourself the time and the space, because a lot of time in the military you're bouncing from job to job, from exercise to operations, backwards and forwards, traveling the world, doing this and doing that, which is fantastic. The tempo will naturally slow. And one of my big bits of advice would be to take that time, particularly in your resettlement. So once you're in your last kind of 3-4 months, you've done your final day in uniform, which, as Billy said, it is a traumatic day. And actually, if you don't necessarily realise it on the day, once you reflect upon that day, you'll realise actually that was quite a significant day in your life. And it will be. And, you never get that day back. It's always going to be part of your life. But it's, as Lizzy said, it's about moving on, self-expression, and actually growing into your own skin almost. You've left the confines almost of the military. For most people, it's been an absolutely fantastic experience. It shapes you as a human. It shapes how you perceive things going forward. But actually, you can now build on that. You've got the opportunity to absorb different things and to really kind of absorb the different cultures and norms and different people that you're going to experience. So, yeah, I think it's a journey for sure.
Absolutely, and I'm guessing, I've not been in the military myself, but when from speaking to all of you, and obviously an awful lot more, there's kind of that anxiety upon leaving, and there's so many different factors to that. Now, if we focus on one specific one, let's say kind of the employment side, do you think that employers do enough to provide that level of support, that level of exposure to say, here's how we can support veterans in the workplace. Here's some initiatives that we've got. And actually, here's some people within our business that have gone through the same transition as yourself. And I'll start with Matt on that one.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with what everyone said so far. I think there is an anxiety when you first leave, and totally agree with what Billy says. It's nerve-wracking. I was super excited, and the day I walked out the gate, it was nerves straight in. I think from an employer side, is there more we could do? Yeah, I think, look, when we look at military people, we go, fantastic qualities. They're going to give us this. They're going to give us this. They're going to bring this to the team. But do we understand how we can help with that transition? I think one of the things when I left, I had a job lined up, but I didn't speak to him till the day after I'd left. Like, whereas if I'd had contact with him as I was leaving, I think it gives you that sense of, you know where you're going, you've got a sense of belonging, you know what you're going to walk into, you feel a little bit more confident, a little bit more comfortable. So I think that we can do things like have more contact. I think the other bit as well is understanding what's within our business. So one of the bits of work we did was understanding who had served within our company. So, you know, when we have people that leave the forces and they join us, we can introduce them to other people. Again, it's people that you can connect with. Look, we all have a different sense of humor. We would all say things, but it's having that person that you can relate to really helps with that support through. I think there's a lot on a sense of, from an employer side, that we can do to understand that will help that journey of transition a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, Andy, have you got anything to kind of add to that?
Just want to kind of hit it from the point of like pre-leaving the military. So I left from the sergeant's mess, and in the run-up to leaving the military, there was a lot of expectation, I think is probably the best word to use, amongst the guys that were going through the process. And the talk over the dinner table would be, oh, did you hear about such and such who left a year ago? He's now raking in 120k a year, doing very little or doing very, very much or whatever. And with every conversation like that, I was going, do you know what? I owe this to Civvy Street now. I owe this to my mates. I owe this to my previous life to go out and represent the military and go out and try and aim for these kind of high-flying jobs. But am I going to go walk straight into one of them? As Matt demonstrates, you start at the bottom and you work your way up. We do it in the military, yet we expect to come in at this high kind of level. Also, employers seem to think that all military veterans, when they're coming out of the military, especially if it's a full career and it's a full service, and you're coming out as a senior rank or an officer, perhaps. I'm not going to talk down employers, but a lot of them only see what they see on the TV. They only see the war films. They only see the troop in the colour and the shouty sergeant major types. And the Army's not like that. We're a people organisation, people-led organisation. The teamwork and the team ethic and the team bonding is absolutely amazing. And that circles right back to what Joe was saying about, and Lizzie was saying about that identity. When you hand that identity card in, it is not just a piece of plastic that's going. It's a whole way of life and a whole meaning of life for however long you've been doing it for.
Dr. Lizzie.
Yeah, so I think one thing I think it's really important to focus on, it can be extremely liberating and really exciting. Now, I think it very much depends on what your experience has been, what qualifications you have. And I always advise that those who are leaving, we all know there is an end date when we might leave. I mean, some leave more quickly, sadly, if you've been medically discharged or something's happened. But on the whole, we have some idea when we're leaving. We need to plan our departure from the moment we arrive, because the more skills you have, the more qualifications, the more experience you have to build up that picture for when you're leaving, so that absolutely it's a natural progression. It's just another stage of your career. Now, I totally get, if you're in a regiment or you've got that whole camaraderie around you, and that's, I know, is what can be really lost. But it's building that network before you leave. And I think sometimes from my experience of supporting those in transition, it's suddenly, I'm leaving, I've gone, and not that building up for many years beforehand So getting your civilian network established, getting your, building that life. So it just is like an exciting next stage of your life rather than something's ended and you're waiting for something else to begin.
Do you think that that's down to entirely on the shoulders of an individual? Because obviously when somebody goes into something, probably last thing on your mind is planning for the end of that. So it's almost quite an unnatural thing to kind of start thinking about. But surely there could be more done either by way of support network or communication or resources to say, here's what we would recommend. And so that hopefully, like you said, that building up of that transition and that building of the civilian networks, if you like, ready for when you do leave, whenever that may be. Surely it's not just on one individual to kind of start thinking about that, because I'm feeling the pressure and, that's just kind of me thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a two-way thing. It's got to be in an individual. We will have to take responsibility, and the organisation has to support you. And I think that is sometimes where it's a struggle, because we sometimes lose our identity within the military. And everything's done for us. You don't have to think about where you're going to eat, where you're going to sleep, all that basic stuff that you suddenly have to take ownership for when you leave. So it's I think the transition really starts for many, many years before you actually leave. And that would be my biggest advice for those in transition. And what everybody said to me, take that time. So no, I'm at a headquarters busy job. I haven't got time for all that. And now that is my biggest advice. Just take the time. Unfortunately, when you leave, you're a number, and you will never, ever forget our number, but you are a number. And every job I've ever done, no one's taken after me. I've nearly killed myself in the process, and then suddenly the job's gapped. Think, well, what was all that for? So that's my biggest advice, is to take the time that really is owed to you, and just do whatever you can to make sure that you have that transition.
Yeah, I wish I could have gave myself that advice as a young soldier. Unfortunately, you're too busy living the dream and going on Gucci tours and serving in jungles and deserts and stuff like this. The reality is, for most squaddies, they're not looking at getting out of the army. They're too busy living the lifestyle that the army give them at the time. And yes, you're right. If we had that advice right at the start, the military don't work that way. They don't tell you, get prepared for getting out when you start. They just want you to do the job they want you to do. So I believe many of us leave very unprepared for civilian life. And that's where the anxiety comes in. We're not coming out to the Gucci job that we all want. We do start at the bottom, like Matt's done, and successfully. But we just need to be given that opportunity by an employer to actually see the skills we have. Because in a lot of the times as veterans, we don't know the skills we have because we do them day to day. So we have to recognise the skills we have. And that's a difficult journey as well. We just take everything for granted because we do the job we're trained to do. And sometimes that's quite powerful jobs that we do. But we don't always recognise that because it's our day-to-day life. And that's something we can offer to any civilian employer, as a vast life experience of different countries, different environments, working with different types of people. We are, as Andy said earlier, we're a people-centred organisation. We don't go to fight wars most of the time. We go to help people most of the time. And I think that's what we can offer any civilian employer, a way of communicating with others that's a lifetime of skills that we've had within the military.
And I think you've actually touched upon something there. Sorry, Matt, go on after you.
No, go on, Paul.
No, after you, go on.
I was just going to say, I think it's really important. I think if you look at this from an employer perspective, and Liz and Billy have just raised it brilliant there, is we're so conditioned to problem solve everything that we never give ourselves that reflection time. And it's something that, we could do is, even from an employer point of view, I'm just thinking now is, give someone a few days to reflect on where they've come from. Because I think, look, for myself, I'm so conditioned on how do I solve that problem? How do I move to the next one? That I nearly broke myself because I never reflected on who am I? Like you were saying, Liz, who am I? What skills have I got to then build myself and move back forwards? And that's something that we can do naturally, when we're employing people like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a collection of people, businesses, charities and support organizations that kind of need to get together to help. Billy, you mentioned about, how do you kind of transfer the experience that somebody gains in the military into a CV that kind of fits for the civilian employment. And I think that isn't just down to, the forces recruitment companies that are out there, or charities, or CTP. Actually, employers, everyone has some sort of influence in how they can best support. And I think that more people need to work together to try and find these solutions rather than working individually for the same goal. Let's get together and try and kind of join that. And what I would really love to ask is, again, and I'll open this up to everyone, but your own personal struggles with mental health and what has made you that you're never, maybe you're not going to kind of recover fully from that, and the mental health struggles will always be there, but what has helped you kind of overcome some of your mental health struggles? And Andy, I'll start with you on that one.
So when I quite a mixed bag when I first came out of the military, I dreamt of going into the events industry, and I find myself some 9 years later in a health and safety industry and talking about mental health. So kind of a really kind of twisted journey along the way there. But yeah, so it affected me quite deeply when I came out. That loss of identity, I didn't have a purpose anymore. I didn't have anything to do. I was financially well off because I had my 22-year pension. I was getting my monthly pension kind of coming through. So financially, everything was absolutely fine, but I didn't have that purpose. I didn't have that reason for living, for getting up in the morning, putting that uniform on and becoming somebody. And yeah, Lizzie's talking about finding identity. It's taken me a long time to find it. But what I was doing was approaching every job that I had with a military ethos, which is work hard, work damn hard, work damn good, and work as hard as you can until the job is done. And that led me to burning myself out, breaking myself down. I remember starting one job on a Monday morning. By the Thursday, I had the keys to the building. And I was opening the office at 6:30 in the morning, leaving 7 o'clock in the evening. My contracted hours were 8 till 4:30. That first job, I had to get told to take my annual leave coming up to Christmas. Otherwise, I was going to lose it because nobody had told me to do it. I'd spent 22 years of my life being told you'll go on leave this date at Easter, you'll go on leave at summer, you'll go on leave at Christmas, having somebody planning my life. And I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know I could take leave when I wanted to. I didn't know it was okay to say, look at my watch and say, oh, it's 25 past 4, I'll shut the computer down, I'm going home. I didn't know I could do that because of the military ethos of the 24/7 battlefield and doing it that way. So I think employers helping veterans into that and kicking them out the door, saying, look, you don't have to be here. Go and enjoy your life. Find that work-life balance. And you're going to get a great employee if you do that kind of stuff.
Perfect. And what about kind of anyone else that's maybe kind of had their own kind of personal struggles with mental health and what helps you overcome it?
I mean, I suffered when I was in my last posting, actually. I was on antidepressants and I was depressed and I was having a rough time. But I then actually, as I was talking about, I kind of reflected about what I had to offer. And then I suddenly kind of woke up and I realised I had been a bit of a victim. And no wonder I'd had some experience of, bullying, I would say, is how I felt it was. And it's an amazing organisation, no reflection. I was absolutely up for it. And then suddenly I stood tall and thought, right, no more. And that set my purpose to acknowledge that we are all awesome. None of us are broken. And it just changed my thinking. And that set me on my path to help individuals find their purpose, get rid of toxic leadership and own who you are. So I think sometimes you have those moments, sometimes it's longer, but it was that power of reflection of my career and what I'd done and what I'd achieved, which I hadn't really looked at, and realised there was a theme here. For me, it was giving people a voice, whether it was a nurse or as a midwife or in my research or all the jobs I'd done. And suddenly it was like light bulb went open. I thought, oh my God, that's what I need to be doing. And once we stand tall as to own who we are, suddenly our mental health just like rockets because we suddenly accept ourselves. And that is what's really powerful.
Yeah, it is. That is really powerful. And, again, I've spoken to people that haven't, quite kind of got to that stage yet, and there's that feeling of kind of loneliness and that lack of a support network. And what I'd really like to kind of then put out to maybe kind of Joe is what ideas could be developed to kind of support transition into civilian employment, and how can kind of employers get involved with that?
Well, I'm going to come at this from, as I said, a wellbeing and emotional health point of view. Obviously, working for Samaritans, and one of the key things that I don't think the military as a whole have really grasped until the last kind of 5 years is the emotional health side of the transition. CTP has been in place for many years, and you can say what you want about CTP. They're there for the kind of hard skills. You're going to transition out. You need skills to do this job or that job, or how to write a CV. Your more hard skills. The Defence Transition Service, which is kind of like the sister to CTP, so to speak, is the recent focus on that emotional transition. And actually, and we've touched on this, a few times already, but you need to see it as a bit of an MOT with regards to your emotional health, and actually how you interact with others, and the day-to-day dealings with the different situations that you're now going to encounter as a civilian. And they will be different. Inherently, they will be different. And I think what's been brilliantly touched on already is, it's almost self-induced stress that you find yourself you put yourself under. And actually, what a lot of people, and this is through kind of anecdotal research that we've done at Samaritans, is that people didn't think they'd ever feel as stressed or as anxious as they did in the military. Traumatic experiences, or whether on tour. I myself never thought I'd hit a point where I was so anxious and stressed, even more so than when you get shot at in theatre somewhere. I never really had the opportunity to reflect on that. It's only years since. But actually, what I think is really important for employers is firstly to recognise this, that it's not just those hard skills. It's very much an emotional transition, very, very much so. And it's multifaceted. It's culture, it's norms, it's relationships. All these need to be almost redesigned, and it's definitely a navigation for your individual leaving the military. But I think Matt touched on actually with regards to that, you can almost call them like a military conduit. Someone that's embedded in an organisation. And it needs to be at the point of contact. So it needs to be in the recruitment cycle. So whatever company you are, whatever you do, really understand that, the net that you cast out to bring in the talent for your organisation, that's the point of contact. And actually, I would argue that it's at that point that at that military conduit, that person who's had an experience in the military, who is able to relate, as Matt said, who can decode a military CV. And a lot of time, you've done all these courses, and it's been touched on. That then needs translating into, how is this now helpful for a civilian organisation? And actually having someone who's embedded into the recruitment process for an organisation, being able to decrypt and decode all this stuff, and being able to draw through that talent and being able to recognise it through their own experience, I think is absolutely key. But yeah, very much, and we've touched on this, is to recognise the emotional journey of those leaving the military, recognise that the way that they've been conditioned to manage their emotional responses is very different, and they're having to navigate all these different things, as well as find a job, meaningful employment, perhaps get their kids into a new school, move to a different side of the country. Their spouse now needs to find a new job because they've moved 400 or 500 miles, whatever it might be. There's a lot of things going on. And can you meet them in the middle? Ask yourself that question. Can you meet them in the middle? And actually, at that point of contact, I would argue, is a really good place to have someone to act as a conduit, to be able to draw that talent through.
Amazing. Anyone got anything to add on that? No. So I think
I was just going to say, I wish I'd had something like that as I was coming out. It was I was fighting a losing battle with my whole transition coming out into Civvy Street. I settled in an area where I didn't really know anybody, and yeah, it was like fighting blind. It was like fighting through the jungle without a compass. It was really didn't have any direction at all. I would have given my left arm for something like that, to be shown the way. And if it was an employer that could just sit me down and say, look, this is how civvies work. Just tell me how civvies work. Tell me how civvies don't like the kind of humour that we have and the laddish kind of culture that Scotties generally come out with. Tell me to wind it in a little bit. That would help me so much. It would help me so much, especially with like anger issues and things.
I think what you do. Oh, sorry, Matt. On you go.
No, go on, Billy. Go.
I think what we do offer is loyalty. We're an incredibly loyal bunch of people. Like any employer that takes a veteran on and molds them the way the company want them to be, we will be as loyal as a dog. We will do everything we can to make that job work. I didn't have that when I came out. I went into several jobs. Brain was still operating as a soldier. So loading trucks up, it gets to 7 o'clock, which Andy mentioned, and they all knock off. And I'm thinking, the truck still needs to be loaded up. So I'd stay there myself, loading the truck up when everybody just went home, because that's the kind of mindset we were in. We need that help in how we transition into that. So I started my own business, and I was one that Lizzy spoke about. I was your toxic boss. I was an angry person because the way the military works, if you start at 7 o'clock in the morning, that means you turn up at 10 to 7. So it's 5 minutes before the 5 minutes. We are very programmed to be a certain way. So God betide them, they turned up at a minute past 7 because they were getting chased down the road by Mr. Angry Glaswegian. I found my purpose, which we all need to find through my own mental health problems. And that was to start helping other people. And I knew I described charity work as the most selfish thing you'll ever do, which kind of tends to shock people. But I believe you should feel good about what you do. And if you don't feel good about what you do, you shouldn't be working in a charity. So I get my purpose by helping other people. And what we do when we bring veterans through, they come with a myriad of mental health issues. But I'm more of a practical person, whereas I don't do therapy. But what I do is to give purpose. We've just had a veteran come in this week. I started about 3 weeks ago, and we've just developed a program in what he's told us. And we're going to start a new program, which is going to be keeping bees. He's incredibly keen to do it. There's a lot of similarities between a bee and a veteran, believe it or not, that I've been reading about. It's the programs that work in the States, but it's the mindset of protecting the home and all of this. The mental health, if harnessed, if we get somebody and just give them a purpose, the mental health side goes in the back burner because it's got something to focus on. And I think that's what we should be looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, you were going to say something.
I was going to touch on some of the bits that Andy said. I remember the first job I had when I first come out. My employers loved me. The team that I worked with hated me because they couldn't understand, because I had that work ethic of work hard, work hard, work hard. And the bit I never knew was the new structure of my life. Like you were saying, Andy, then is, no one sat me down and said, you're not going to get your 3 meals a day, but you can have a 5-minute fag break. If you want to go do that, that's fine as long as you're working. But all I did know was work hard, work hard, work hard. What I didn't have, and the biggest thing, the real thing that I struggled with, was I didn't have no one to talk to. So my employers loved me. I'd go to work and I'd work hard all day. The team I worked with couldn't understand me because they're like, who's this? The guy's like a machine. He won't stop for anything, because I didn't know when to stop. But what I found myself doing was I'd take it out at home. So my frustration, because I didn't have that person to go to. I'd lost, we all have people when we're in that 2-3 o'clock in the morning. You could call anyone, they'll be there for you. Like the people at work at 5:30, it stops, that's game over, and you will go back to your own lives until you start building them relationships. And it's super hard to do that when you don't know the structure of your new life. But what it then does do is, and for me, and it did cost me my relationship, I started getting angry at home because I didn't know how to vent or who to talk to. I didn't have that person, that them go-to people. I think that's why it's so super important to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've had a question in actually, which kind of almost follows on. So firstly, I think there's a wider discussion to be had to say there are some companies out there that aren't averse to recruiting kind of ex-military personnel, but maybe don't have somebody within the business that has previously served. And therefore, how do you go about supporting an individual that maybe you haven't got the experience of doing? And I think there needs to be a wider network of people that are available to help support organizations where they can always get involved on that monthly basis. And I think that we kind of pick that up another time. But somebody's put a question in the chat that and I'll open it up to anyone, but did anyone have any trouble or struggles leaving a bad career opportunity after leaving the military?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that if you like. This is this loyalty thing that Billy was alluding to earlier on, and Matt's been alluding to as well. I went for a job with the Olympics that fell through. Everything up to a reason. A particular car came past and it had this particular company's name written on the side of it. And I was like, I didn't know there was a company like that around here. So I phoned them up and I said, just come out of the army. I'm still getting paid. I've got plenty of money. I don't need money off you. I want to gain experience in health and safety because I had the qualifications. So I was thinking on my feet, being nice and adaptable. I thought, yeah, everything happens for a reason. I'll phone them up. They were nice enough to give me a month's worth of free work experience, and I'm forever indebted to them for that. Valuable work experience that I got. I was working for them. I was being productive for them. I was learning, more importantly, about the industry. There was a job opening at the end of it, and they said, sorry, you ain't got no experience. And I was like, I've just been doing a month's worth of work experience with you. But I thought, yeah, I'll listen to their advice. So I went out and sought some other kind of jobs to get some wider experience. And I went and worked in the aviation industry. I worked in the explosives industry. And I was getting this experience. And then all of a sudden, they've moved to a location. I see them at the bottom of my road. I'm like, this is meant to be. So I threw my hat in the ring for this job that they were offering. Told them about all the experience that I'd got. I'd learned a bit more about being a civvy by then, so I was able to come across quite well at interview, and I got offered the job. What I then thought I had to do, because they had been nice enough to give me a job, and they were the ones that had given me this work experience, I pretty much thought I'd signed on again. And I'd just committed to a 22-year full career and never working for anybody else in my life, which wasn't the case. I pretty soon outgrew the job with the way that it was going, with my work ethic. I started struggling with my mental health issues, and the understanding, and we'll circle right back to this vision that all veterans have PTSD or all veterans are broken. I just had depression and stress. There was nothing. There was no PTSD involved. There was none of that kind of broken stuff. But that assumption was there by my employers, and I wasn't allowed to come back into work after they'd signed me off on a sick. And they tried to smoke me out of the business, put me on statutory sick pay, wouldn't contact me. They wouldn't contact me. Even when I was in the military and I'd been in military hospitals, and I'm sure Lizzy will clarify this, you get contacted by your family, as in your military family. If you were lying in a hospital bed, the sergeant major will come and see you. Your managing director will be at your bedside effectively. But yeah, not a single bit of contact. But I still had this loyalty to them. I just couldn't shake it. Thankfully, I'm out of there now. And I have discovered what my path is. I've discovered my true identity. And I'm in a much better place. But had I had the other veteran connections to say, do you know what, you shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be doing that to you. This shouldn't be working this way. I probably wouldn't have done as long as I did there. So yeah, quite a bad experience, but everything happens for a reason. And now I know.
Absolutely.
The thing is with loyalty is a two-way stretch. Like it works both ways, and it has to work both ways. But if we get the loyalty from a business, you'll get that back in tenfold. You know, like that. I think we've got a great deal to offer with that.
Yeah, without doubt. And on little things like you want to go to the doctors or something, you got to take half an hour off to go to the doctors. Some companies that I've been involved with, you had to book personal holiday for that. And that's what I thought. That's what I'd been told. But then on leaving, they're saying, "Oh, you haven't got any holiday left. How come you've taken so much holiday? How come you took a half day here for a doctor's appointment? You're allowed to go to the doctor's appointment." So nobody told me that. So yeah, those little kind of instructions from the employer would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think it's the understanding, isn't it? It's the education of the companies to the wider employees that maybe, if they've got, ex-military personnel within the business, it's actually educating the wider business to understand that, it's not preferential treatment. You're just treating an individual based on the circumstances that they've previously kind of, been used to, and it might be different to somebody else's. And I think that's a really important thing that companies have to start kind of acknowledging. And we've also had another question in, and I'd be really keen to kind of hear your thoughts on this. So the CTP are well known in, and I'm reading this as it's written. So this isn't necessarily my view, but I'm going to offer it out. The CTP are well known in selling lies regards to civilian trades and salaries. Do you think this needs addressing? If so, how would you go about it?
I think they set people up for their first knock. From experience, from people I've interviewed, sat down with, I think we had a great conversation about this on Friday. People come in with, they're going to get this salary up here and they're going to achieve this. And when they actually sit down with you and they realize they're not, I think that's the first knock that you'll get. And I think it's a really good question. For me, that needs to be changed in where can you start and where can you work up to? From an employer point, I was just going to say on another bit is, I think one of the things I've noticed for myself and for people that have come with me on the journey is is having clear routes for things like career progression. One of the things I've seen a good friend of mine struggle with is just being in a job that's dead end, that his mind can't grow. We're so conditioned to, promotion is upwards, isn't it? It's becoming a lance corporal, sergeant. You're used to working up in the ladder and having a clear route. It's making sure that clear route goes. But I think there does need to be a change and a flip in the way that CTP say what you will achieve and what you can potentially earn.
Yeah,
I think what's really important is the culture. I think that's what we've all been talking about here, the fundamental difference in the culture of the military environment and the civilian environment. And I think there needs to be much more done with communication, so that there's some acknowledgement from both parties, from the service leaver who's actually joining and then the organisation. Now, as an officer, we're very lucky because as the Officers Association, which has got a massive spreadsheet of hundreds of ex-service who are happy to almost mentor those going in. So, for example, Deloitte, Deloitte, there's a military program in order to support military personnel coming into Deloitte, for example. Now, that has to happen for every single service leaver, no matter what level you are, because I think there is, as you talked about, Billy and Andy, this whole thing about, do I have to take leave for my doctor's appointment or do I not? This is all about communication and all about acknowledging where we've come from, what we're joining, and sort of having that discussion as to this is my expectations, these are your expectations, and then knowing, where the ground lies so that you can have those conversations opposed to just making these assumptions.
And I think we touched on it when we spoke on Friday, as pride gets in the way of asking them simple questions from an employer. So, and something Andy, I think it was Andy mentioned earlier on, we don't know how to do the simplest things that people just take for granted and outside the military, because everything basically is done for us. And so we don't have to think about these little things, so we can concentrate solely on the task we have. So we don't do all the simple things like doctor's appointments and dentist appointments. That's done for us, and we just go when we're told to go. So to bring that into your civilian life, we're too proud to say, well, how do you do this? Yeah. And that gets in the way, and that actually exacerbates mental health issues, because we just bury all this stuff inside and don't allow it to come out. And it just, a small problem and another small problem and another becomes a huge problem. And before long, we're surrounded by all these little problems that taken in isolation don't really amount to much. But because of our pride gets in the way of, we're used to being a certain kind of individual and telling people what to do within our career in the military, that gets in the way of us asking the questions that are simple, and that kind of affects us long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think thinking about making that transition, and we've spoken about kind of personal kind of experiences and your own personal mental health struggles. How important is that family support? Because obviously, yes, it's you individually that may be making that transition, but as an upheaval, it's actually the whole family that kind of gets affected, including the spouses, and quite often spouses do get forgotten about, and there doesn't seem to be as much of a support structure for there. Was there a wider issue regarding kind of family mental health for any of you?
I'll jump in. Nobody else says. One thing we always miss is the family, because the military is very centered on one thing: the soldier, or the sailor, or the airman. They don't care about the family as much. In fact, when I served, they didn't care at all. They just went where the army sent you. So the transition was the exact same. They didn't really look at the family. They just looked, you're out, you're gone. So going back to what Lizzy said earlier on about planning for the future, I deal with a lot of this now. They're leaving the military and they don't plan where they're going to live, what job they're going to do, what purpose they have once they leave. They don't plan for any of this, which means that all creates family mental health issues, because the pressure is on the family of where are we going to live, what we're going to do, how we're going to get money. The whole thing needs to be done as a holistic view of when we leave the services, what is the package? If the package has to leave together, and unfortunately, we don't always look at that as those who are. Well, the military doesn't look at it because it's not in their interest at the end of the day.
There's an interesting point you make there about families and stuff like that. I remember, and I suspect everybody on this panel right now can probably remember one of the best bosses they ever had, and probably one of the worst bosses, and probably the same difference is going to be the same. And I'm going to watch for these smiles of recognition here. The best boss that I ever had, sitting at the top of a regiment, and I was like a corporal level, so a supervisor level to CEO of a 1,000-man kind of company or 1,000-person company. Whenever I saw him walking around the camp, he'd ask how my partner was, but not just like how's your missus or how's the wife. He'd ask how's your wife by her name, how's little such and such, how are they getting on at football, and he was amazing. He was an absolutely amazing boss because he made that time to know me and know what made me tick. And that was absolutely fantastic. The worst boss I've ever had, didn't know my partner's name, didn't know anything, but they weren't in the military. They were in Civvy Street. And they probably still don't know what my partner's name is or what my kids' names are. And that makes a difference. If you want to make a difference with veterans, know your people, know what makes them tick. And give that support there with them. Let them go off for early on a Friday to watch the school play. The loyalty and the work ethic you're going to get back is going to be phenomenal there.
And I know this is obviously a supporting our veterans kind of webinar, but I think the point you touched upon there around knowing your colleagues, knowing people, knowing the families and getting time to know them. I think so many people get so engrossed in the work and the deadlines and you've got to hit this and you've got to hit that all of the personal nature of getting to know someone, especially when it's been live over Zoom for the last 12, 18 months, kind of almost gets eradicated. And that needs to be brought back in. And likewise on the flexibility front, ex-military aside, personally speaking, I think companies need to be showing that flexibility. So going to the kids' plays as an example is some of the most precious time in your life, and you can't get those back. And that it's not level of loyalty, it's not a level of support. It's actually just being a kind human. It's just being good. It's just doing the right things. And that's where I think kind of companies have got an awful lot to kind of look to doing, just to say it's not a benefit. This is just how we are. We've had another question in. So hopefully will probably be more to you, but the MOD and others promote the fact that you're leaving the military, civvies will adore you for your medals, time served, etc. This is not necessarily the case. Civvies remember you 1111. Other than that, you're a payroll number, not unlike the MOD when you kind of decided to leave. So I don't necessarily know exactly kind of what that question is, but should the transitioning process set you the true expectations of Civvy Street? And if so, how again?
No one cares. I mean, I've never used, actually, it's interesting. I left the lieutenant colonel. I've never used my rank because no one cares. The only time I've ever used my rank was not even my rank, but I was told you've got to tell people your rank because that gives others hope too, as a woman, which is a very sad reflection, but that's how it is. So I did, and that point, it was amazing. Oh my God, you showing what I can do too. But I think no one cares about rank, what you've done. Everybody just sees, in my experience, you are in the services, you were in the services, and it's just one size fits all. And all they care about what problem you can solve for them.
Anyone else got anything else to mention on that?
That is the case. Yeah, I go out and I collect for the Royal British Legion on Remembrance Day and stuff, and yeah, you get all the public come and say thank you, and they do their duty bit and put the money in the pots and stuff. Literally the day after Armistice Day, the day after Remembrance Day, 12th of November. That's it. Your medals go away, and then the rest of the time you're just back to plain old Mister. And it's just that period of time. It's like Mental Health Awareness Week this week. The amount of posts I'm seeing on social media about Mental Health Awareness Week, like it's just for 1 week in a year. It's we're veterans 24/7. Mental health doesn't switch off just because nobody's talking about it on social media. I think, we need to get this holistic kind of all of the thing. But Lizzie's absolutely right. Once we're out of the army or the service, we're out of the service.
Yeah. And look, I know that obviously we are doing this webinar during Mental Health Awareness Week, so we could be one of the people that you're actually kind of alluding to. But Andy, you and I have had conversations. We have conversations with the rest of the panelists as well. Is that it is the focus? It's not just once the awareness kind of week is here, or the awareness day, or the celebration day. It's an ongoing thing, and that is so important to make sure that companies do realize it. It's not just a tick boxing exercise. It's not a badge of honor and you've done your job. It's a year-round thing. It's every single day there needs to be the focus on it. We've had one final question, I think, just before we kind of then wrap up. Did any of you ever consider re-enlisting, having left?
Numerous times.
Yeah. In short, yes. I think I'll tell you what it is. I mean, I can only speak for myself here, but I alluded to it in my introduction that I left because there was a misalignment in this dissatisfaction within the army. Right. I then transitioned out. I went into a job where, again, that alignment wasn't there. So I was confronted with having to reflect on the reasons why I left. And the conclusion was that there was a misalignment between what I got out of it compared to what I had to give to it. That was my conclusion. Only then to jump into an industry, and as to be said, a company where there was no alignment. And, what really resonates with us is, that authentic leadership, something that's, embedded values that people abide by. And actually, you can see it. It's something tangible. It's not just something that's written down. You live these values. And actually what you figure out when you leave and you get into Civvy Street is, there's potentially, and I can't speak for organisations, obviously, but perhaps they don't practice what they preach internally with regards to some of that. And actually then the misalignment then just keeps going on. But I think not so much now, but definitely early on, as I said, once I realised that, the misalignment is still there, would it be beneficial to go back in? And it did cross my mind. It did cross my mind. I think it has done for a lot of people, especially a lot of mates who've left as well and are now veterans. And you get those cash incentives as well. So there's all that kind of stuff to consider.
And Matt, you were about to say that you did you kind of reconsidered on numerous occasions. Was that because of a bad experience? Was it because you were missing what you had previously?
Yeah, for me it was. Look, I joined when I was 16. I went and did, like I said, a year at the foundation college, and that it was all I knew. So I come out and we alluded on it with the structure, and I didn't know where my meals were coming from, paying bills, and all these sorts of things. And I had a young family at the time, and I was taking out on them. And it was I could go back to what I know, and I know everything goes back to normal. And you sort of go back because that you can get the stability back. Again, if I'd had someone reassuring me at the time, I don't think I'd have wobbled, but I did. I wobbled hard numerous times because you go, wow, this is harder work than what I think it's going to be. Actually, to get myself somewhere, I'm going to have to really dig in and look at different angles. Or, I can go there and I know my bills are going to be looked after. I know my accommodation's sorted. I know my family's done. All of that's there, and it did play numerous mind tricks with you because you go, I could do because I'm still young enough. Or I can say and sort of evaluate this. And that's where the reflection time really helped. That's when I had a big wobble and reflected on where I wanted to get to, what the end goal was. And that's how I pulled through that. But yeah, no, numerous times wobbled on that.
Kind of different from me is I didn't have a medical discharge. They offered me a medical discharge, but I believed I couldn't get a job in civilian life if I had a medical discharge. So I signed off instead of taking the medical discharge. And so I wasn't mentally prepared for leaving the military. So all I ever wanted to do when I get out was get back in, but due to the injury I had, I couldn't get back in. So that mentally kind of disturbed me for many years. So that's when I started a business, and I believed that if I could employ people that I thought were friends, that would be great and everything would be back to normal again. But as we all know, business doesn't really work like that. You don't really work with your friends. So that created more mental health anguish. Try to tell my friends what they had to do or tell them off for not doing the job right was damaging for myself, my own personality. And that's what ended up starting a charity, which found myself again. But I've always been desperate to get back in the army. I believe my career was cut too short, and kind of unfinished business. And that's probably why I do what I do now.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, just before we wrap up, I think I've spoken to a couple of you on individual occasions about kind of creating a network specifically for service leavers, and I think that's something that's kind of I'm really passionate about doing and joining that on the kind of the includability community. So anyone that is watching, anyone that's on the panel, I'll be sending an email out and we can kind of get together as to what the format might look like. But I think that would really kind of help, because not only could it help individuals either looking, but actually it could really help companies. We could be there as a support network to help these companies that maybe don't have somebody internally, but we could provide that wider network to make sure that anyone that does join them has that support network in place as well. So we'll send a follow-up email. I would just like to say kind of a massive thank you to everyone on the panel today. It's been absolutely inspiring to kind of listen to you all and listen to your stories. And I think some key takeaways really is that it's pretty kind of evident that not every person is broken when leaving the military. I think that there is so much to offer from nearly every single person if companies and support organizations took the time to try and make sure that transition was a bit smoother and there was more support there. And I think companies need to take a bit more action when it comes to supporting and kind of that awareness when it comes to employing and giving opportunities to kind of military, ex-military personnel. So that we're going to follow this up. This webinar is being recorded. It will be edited and kind of sent out to everyone. So do keep an eye out on that. If anyone's got any further questions following this, please get in touch and we'll put it to the panelists. But I think for now, let's kind of wish you a great rest of the week. And once again, thank you to everyone for being here today.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Speak to you all soon.
In a bit.
Yeah.